Sapien. We've been friends for a very long time. I remember crashing on Trevor's couch in 2014 here in Toronto for the Bitcoin Expo, one of the first conferences to cover crypto here back in the day. And so what I was talking about earlier, like 2013, 2014 vibes, you'll notice there's a lot of people in the room that have been in the industry for a very long time. And I think it's a great reflection of sort of the builder energy and the people that do and don't just talk. So Trevor's a good friend. He's built tons of stuff in crypto over the years, many of the protocols that you've probably heard of. He's probably been involved in them since the earliest days. And so without any further ado, I'll get your slides up here. Tell me, I'll push the little button and keep it moving. But welcome, sir. Big round of applause.
Thanks, Dave.
I'm just going to click it for you. You go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for coming. David is an awesome guy. Thanks for organizing this. He and I go way back, and he's working on a really cool project called Morpheus that I'm really excited to be a community member of, and everyone should check that out. He's always early, Dave is, so like super early on I remember he was involved in one of the very first coins ever. So back then, Ethereum didn't exist, but he didn't let that stop him. He started creating projects like Mastercoin, which was on top of the Bitcoin protocol before there was any infrastructure to do that easily. So just early to that party, and then turned it into an amazing project. And then now with AI and decentralized AI, is what I think is one of the most exciting categories, not just in crypto, but all of tech. Not AI, that's obvious. I mean decentralized AI, because we all are starting to see the problems with this huge centralized kind of dominant control of the big tech companies. So a little background on myself. I'm from here in Toronto. This was kind of the birthplace of a lot of important protocols in crypto, as we all know. I remember the early days hanging out with Dave kind of in the pre-Ethereum Toronto Bitcoin Decentral offices, where Vitalik was at that time a editor at Bitcoin magazine, and he started handing out white papers that barely anyone read, which turned out to be Ethereum. And Toronto kind of had its time in the sun. We were the place to be for that whole era, because a lot of the Bitcoin community was predicated in Toronto, and then Ethereum obviously has its roots there. And then we kind of, the rest of the world started getting interested, and there's a lot of hubs everywhere, and Toronto kind of like relatively became lower in the pecking order. But recently, it's kind of changed, because we have amazing technical talent in the city. That's, I think, number one. We have amazing startups now in this new era of AI coming up, like this man right here, Ben from Wombo. And the technical talent with our crypto DNA is like Toronto's back on the map again, and there's like amazing tier one projects like Barachain coming out of here. So it's a little bit of a side quest for my presentation, but I always try to hype up the city now that we have a lot of really talented people like you guys here. Definitely the place to be. So,
woo!
Okay, so I was the guy in Toronto that would go to a lot of the conferences and wasn't doing much, and then folks like David and Anthony Diorio would make fun of me because I was just a conference guy. And then based on a lot of their help, I launched a project in 2018 called Polynet, and that was an early like Ethereum app. And we had a lot of fun. Yeah, you can do the next couple slides. It was a lot of fun. We did the whole journey from nothing to fundraising to becoming an app on Ethereum to realizing that the market we were going after was a little early. So at the time, it was known as security tokens, so tokenizing real-world assets like stocks, bonds, and real estate. But the market wasn't really there, and we had a decision to make. Do we want to keep pushing like a square peg through a round hole kind of thing? Or maybe we rethink our strategy? And so we decided to kind of move down the stack from building an application on Ethereum to actually building our own layer one chain. And it was actually an early pioneer in Ethereum, actually one of the co-founders of Ethereum and a founder of Cardano, who helped us design the layer one blockchain for securities. And that was a fun journey because it's a lot different building an application in decentralized land than it is building an L1. On L1s, as security pioneers like Michael Perkland will tell you, it's a whole different ballgame. You have to bootstrap your own validator network, you have to figure out what framework to use or build your own. You have to think about the consensus mechanism you're going to use. Every integration on top of you is custom, so there's no standards when you build a new protocol. So we actually had to do that at Polymath. We created a standard called ERC 1400. That's one of the things we're most proud of, actually, because it's still used today as kind of the default standard for tokenization on Ethereum. So anyways, that's kind of my long intro saying I've kind of been around the block in terms of being a founder, being an investor, launching successful projects, not so successful projects, and just being native. I think that's the key, is like being hands-on with Web3, not just using Coinbase, not just using centralized nodes and services, but like actually like using your ledger and like playing with DeFi and like actually writing smart contracts and reading the block explorers and things like this. Okay, so after about 6 years with Polymath, you can go to the next slide, Dave. I wanted to do something new. And I had a friend of mine who was a machine learning master's student from Waterloo named Bowen, and he was kind of like tutoring me AI about a year and a half ago. And something kind of stood out as he was explaining to me how AI is produced. You can think of it kind of like data on one side, compute on the other side. And compute is like what everyone is excited about. It's NVIDIA, it's the chips, it's the data centers, it's the energy consumption, like that's kind of what you hear about now. But the data side to me was more interesting. And what was interesting about the data side was you can think of AI data production like a supply chain. So it starts out as raw data, kind of like oil. It starts out as raw oil in the ground, crude oil. And then it's kind of useless. You have to actually do something to that raw material, in this case, refine it. And so that's kind of the next step, is taking this data and structuring that data or refining that data. And that's known as the data preparation step in AI production. So that's kind of step 2. And then step 3 is once you have structured data, you can train it. So it kind of goes raw data, structured data, training data. And then after that, you can run inference on it. That's like what happens when you're using ChatGPT. And then after that, it's a flywheel. You're not done. It's not the end of the supply chain. You have to start fine-tuning that data to make it better. So that's what I was learning. And what interested me is kind of one specific part of that, which was the human part. It turns out that humans are very important in the production of AI data. In fact, the reason OpenAI won the early model wars is because they had more human inputs into their data sets than anybody else. They invented a concept known as industrial scale RLHF, which is basically putting a lot of humans in these data sets to teach the machine what they should do at scale. And there's a company well known in Silicon Valley called Scale AI, and they're the ones who are like super. They're one of the biggest AI companies in the world. They have $1 billion in revenue this year, and they're centralized. It's kind of like the same problem with blockchains, is everything kind of changes the game when you have a decentralized viewpoint of the world. So, Dave, go to the next slide. So anyways, humans are critical for AI. They make the data more interesting when you create the data set, and you make it faster and you make it safer because there's more ethical considerations. Next slide. If you look at kind of what a lot of folks say, it's like, this is the new oil, is data. And so he or she who controls the data kind of controls the future. So that's what a lot of folks are saying. Next slide. It's the fastest growing segment. Companies like OpenAI now spend $1 billion per year on human feedback, also known as RLHF. And that's one model within one startup spends $1 billion. And then as soon as OpenAI started spending that money, on humans, the other competition started like matching it. So Google Gemini now spends $1 billion on human feedback now per year. Next slide. One more. And so this is kind of what data labeling looks like. And there's just lots of classification. So you're teaching the machine. A lot of it started out as like bounding box stuff. So it's like, this is a stop sign, this is a human, this is a baby. And that's how scale AI and big companies in Silicon Valley got to be huge, is they had Tesla paying them to like label LiDAR data to help with their first self-driving software updates. But there's all kinds of data labeling. There's like image-based, there's medical. You can like draw bounding boxes around a cancer cell and teach the machine how to do it. Next slide. If you ever wonder how data is labeled, this is kind of how it is done today. The vast majority of enterprise data is structured in centralized facilities in the Philippines and Bangladesh and places like this. And it's literally just thousands and tens of thousands of people in these huge warehouses. They're kind of like, it's not even Web 2, it's like Web 1. It's like call centers of humans making $1 to $2 an hour doing these monotonous data labeling tasks over and over and over again. There's millions of people that do this for a living. It's actually been an amazing job creator. They're not treated the best necessarily relative to other international work, but this is how it's done. And a lot of the value, as I said, it doesn't really accrue. Look at companies like Scale, look at companies like Google. That's where the value accrues, not to the labelers doing the actual work. And I always thought that these were kind of the heroes of modern AI, were the humans, because they were the ones that actually helped make ChatGPT usable. And the reality is OpenAI wasn't the first company to build a model. They were just the first one that worked. Facebook and Google had models internally before OpenAI, but they just didn't work. And until the humans came in at scale, nothing magical happened. Next slide, dude. So super quick so that's why we built Sapien. We're about a year old. We're based here in Toronto. And we're kind of like a two-sided marketplace for data labeling. Think like Uber for data labeling. We're decentralized scale AI, a big company in the US, like I said. So for enterprise, it's high-quality labeling on demand. Next slide. And for labelers, we're trying to empower them. It's like a new form of gig work. So you can just like pull out your Android phone, label data anytime, anywhere, and earn a living wage. And we think this is kind of interesting because there's no other form of gig work where you don't need a car, like an Uber driver. You don't need like to be location specific to do DoorDash. Like literally, this is potentially the first time ever with just an Android phone, you can earn a living wage just by labeling data. And the only qualifications you need is to be human. And so when we built Sapien, it was really for these folks in the Philippines where they have a new option now to like label data, which is much demanded by modern big tech AI companies, and not just big tech companies like long tail AI companies like enterprise AI. I talk a lot about now how the S&P 500, every single one of those companies is going to need their own models. And they're going to be private permission models because they don't want to upload all their private customer data to competitors like OpenAI. They're going to keep that customer data, but they're going to need to build their own models. And as we know before, those models probably won't work unless they have a lot of human feedback in them.
No, I got it. Thanks, man.
Next slide. Do we have video support?
Maybe. I don't think so. Oh, there we go. It's working.
I won't make the demo too long, but it's kind of the two sides. So this is the enterprise side. If you need human feedback in your data set, you upload your customer raw data. It's self-custodied, so it's your data. You upload it to the portal, and you can get an automated quote based on a few variables, like the modality of the data, the quality of the data, the quantity. And then on the supply side, this is what you see on your phone. This is real LiDAR data labeling. So we've tried to gamify it, we've tried to make it fun, and you can actually earn money from your phone labeling data anytime, anywhere. And so this is a real use case of of how data is labeled in real time. And then afterwards, we have some post-training stuff that we do at the end. Go to the next slide. Super quick, we have another skin as well. We're trying to make it fun and gamify data labeling too. So this is a real customer that paid us, by the way, that's labeling fashion data. And might do a quick demo if it works, David. If not, I can move on. Cool. We can, so you guys
There he goes. It's going.
Yeah, so a lot of the labelers are in Southeast Asia. That's where a lot of our labelers currently are. And so we've tried to make it super gamified and fun because that's how they like to do work over there. And we've tried to invent new ways to incentivize people to label accurately. That's actually one of the big challenges with decentralized data labeling is ensuring quality. And that's why companies like Scale AI have all these hierarchical command and control architectures, because it's hard to make people do good work. If you've heard of blockchains, you've probably heard of Sybil attacks, where people try to game the system by not doing actual work and benefiting from it. And so how do you solve that? So we've tried to use Web3 actually, Web3 incentives like staking, where people have skin in the game while they label, and positive reinforcement loops. So it's the more accurately you label, the more rewards you get. And we're trying to replace human managers with real-time feedback. So you get a numerical score on how well you're labeling, and that is directly proportional to your earnings. The more accurate you are, and the more points you earn, the higher your multiplier is, and then the more money you make at the end of the day. Next slide. So we currently have, we're still early stage, but we have a good network of labelers now in 71 different countries. And that's kind of interesting because diversity equals quality. In data labeling, the problem if you have 20,000 men from the Philippines that are all 28 years old, it's actually negative for quality. The data sets get slanted and biased. So we're trying to make it as diverse as possible. So it represents all of society, not just a certain segment of people based on where they are in cultural values and things like this. Next one, Dave. One thing, right now we have kind of a web app that we can use, but we're trying to be cross-platform, so labelers can label from any platform, Telegram, iOS, Android, Chrome extensions. And it's kind of fun because if we have a lightweight architecture, we can actually open up the permissionlessness of the front end, so anyone can hook into it. So not just our customer data, but if any customer needs data labeled, they can just hook in the customer data pipeline to our kind of labeling as a service front end. And all of our labelers, they don't care, they're just kind of labeling the data one after another. Yeah, some of the Web3 stuff, we're Web 2 right now because I think it's important for any founders in the room. You gotta times have changed. You really need to get product market fit before you launch a token. And that could mean Web 2 revenue that you want to layer a token on after. Or if you're pure Web 3 from the beginning, you still need users. It's important to think about that. You don't want to get product market fit after you launch the token. You want to do it before. So really think about launching a protocol first, and then the token is just like gasoline on the fire, if that makes sense. Architecturally, if you guys are interested, AI in Web3 has a ecosystem forming. And so some of the leaders in each category, this is all for Web3 decentralized data. There's a lot more already, but these are kind of some of the leaders in this space. Grass is actually another Canadian founder. He's awesome. And they're doing decentralized data collection. So this is like getting the crude oil out of the ground. And amazing project. They're backed by Polychain. It's becoming a really hot space. So the way I'm kind of thinking about this is hey, maybe we should create an ecosystem that's interoperable. And maybe just like we created standards for ERC20 and ERC1400, maybe data labeling needs a standard as well, or just data in general, because if there's no way for Gratz's data to connect with a structuring platform, which connects to a training model interface like Jensen or BitTensor, which connects to an inference, remember that supply chain I said earlier? So right now it's very manual. If we have data our customers have data, we need to make custom integrations with each data format and data modality. And so, anyways, we're thinking about like, because it's so early, just like we were with polymath, maybe we can like think thoughtfully about how this ecosystem should talk to each other and interoperate. And you see the Lego blocks, that's the euphemism that a lot of smart investors use for DeFi and Web3. It's that everything can kind of tap into everything else in an open, permissionless way. Yeah, so we can skip this, but we have some good investors that we partnered with. Variant is our lead investor from our last round. And yeah, I think Roman, we're going to be at Futurist all week representing Sapien. We love to talk to you guys. Sunny is in the crowd here at the front with the t-shirt on. And we just hired Roman he's a co-founder of Base, which is a big L2 out of Coinbase that's one of the top in the world right now. And yeah, very, very happy to chat. If you guys have any ideas on working together, just to say hi. Thanks again, David, for being here.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things I love about deAI summits is there's a lot of builders in the room. Why don't we go around for questions? We got about 5 minutes. So who's got a question about Sapien or data labeling in general and all this good stuff? I see Mr. Perkins.
Thanks. Really interesting, really interesting presentation.
Speaker's right above you.
Oh, that's fine. I like how you allow a bunch of people to label things and you were trying to gamify it. You mentioned that the more accurate their labeling was, the higher the score they got. How are you determining accuracy? Does that involve a human, or is that a computer that determines accuracy? It seems almost like a meta problem, a fascinating one. How do you guys solve it?
Yeah, that's a good question. There we go. Quality. So if the data is not labeled, how do you know people are doing it accurately or not? And I'm glad you asked this, because we started out, if you look at a company like Scale AI, they're like really good. They're like top decile of performance in terms of quality. That's why huge organizations like the US government and the Pentagon use them, because they're very accurate. And they're like 9 out of 10 accuracy for labels. So that means if all of us in this room are data labelers, 90% of us do a good job. That's really good. But the way they enforce that is by centralized means. They have like humans managing other humans and the humans' bosses managing their bosses. And so we experimented and we said, hey, from a technical standpoint, can we ensure quality in a distributed model? So we experimented with different techniques like mean reversion and anomaly detection, which is kind of like using statistics to probabilistically guess if people are labeling data correctly. We did things like build distribution curves. So we would give the same question to 1,000 labelers, and we kind of build a curve over who we think is being accurate. And this was all automated, so even though it wasn't as accurate as the top decile performers, it's a trade-off, right? Because if you want to be cheaper and faster and more decentralized, you're probably not going to be as accurate. And we actually internally call this the data labeling trilemma, which is, can the customer pay less, the labeler earns more, and quality also being higher? It's like Ethereum scaling, right? Can be decentralized and fast and secure or whatever all at the same time. So anyways, we kind of like made some progress. We went up to like 70%, 80% accuracy. And then we said, hey, what's good at incentivizing people in decentralized marketplaces? Web3. So we actually did a test where we had people stake a token that they had to pay for while they're labeling, and then we could actually threaten to slash them if we detect that they're cheating or not being genuine or not playing accurately, or just not human, if they're just a bot. And it's crazy. As soon as people have skin in the game, it's kind of like finding consensus in L1. No one's doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They're behaving selfishly because it's in their best interest to not get slashed if they try to cheat the protocol. And so we're still early, but we're playing with things like this where it's like, hey, you stake a token while you label, but if we detect that you're cheating, you could actually lose your stake. So not only will you make $0, you'll lose part of the stake. And even if we don't actually slash them, like we just threaten to do it, it's like 2 or 3 standard deviations improvement in accuracy. Like blasted by scale AI, 2 to 3 standard deviations improvement. So we haven't really proved this at scale yet, but to answer your question, that's how we're thinking about labeling.
Are you guys thinking about business data, so like accounting data versus consumer? It looks like you're doing a lot of labeling around consumer style data that any kind of typical person interacts with versus like accounting data.
Yeah, I'd love to share this on the demand side.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
He's kind of talking about the customers and what does that look like, kind of like the customer profile. Yeah, thanks for that. Repeat it. So I started out being like, let's go after the mid-market. This is more of a business thing than a technical thing. We said, let's go after the long tail, like open source models, enterprise models, academic models. Like that's where the growth is going to be, not just these huge LLMs. But early on when we were going to market, we got pulled upstream pretty quickly. We did a trip to Asia. Because we're a Canadian company, we have less restrictions on which companies we can work with internationally. So we actually went to China, the mainland, and came home with some interesting contracts from companies like Alibaba and Baidu. And what's cool about this from a business standpoint is the revenue expansion happens quickly. Because what happens is these big companies start out with you on a pilot, and if that pilot goes well, there's more and more data that they need labeled. It's endless, but there's never enough data to get labeled. So we started out with companies in Asia that were like $6K a month in revenue, in MRR, and we've expanded some of them 10 times in just a few months to like 60K. So still relatively small numbers with MRR. We're at about 200K MRR right now as a company, but that's kind of how we think about what our customer look like. And we're still servicing the original plan, which is like, we had our first customer where we had to label Etherscan data to build a model for a hedge fund to predict price movements. And that was kind of cool. So we're using like Web3 to service Web3 customers. We also had a pancreatic cancer researcher who uploaded MRI data for pancreatic cancer. And we're actually labeling tumors and cancer cells to help teach a model how to detect cancer in MRI scans. So that's an example of specialized human labeling. Right now, scale AI would be considered generalized labeling, like low level, you can speak English, you label data, but the market's now craving more specialized data. So they want doctor data labeled, like MRIs, they want legal data labeled. And you need specialized humans, so now it's not just a couple dollars an hour you can make. If you're like a radiologist and you want to make $300 an hour labeling data from your phone at the beach, you can now do that as well. So that's kind of how we think about it.
Yeah, my question was in a similar vein. I was curious about how if you're somebody who's providing labeling, is all
There you go, brother.
Thank you. Yeah, so if you're someone that's providing labeling data, how is all data worth the same amount? Like, am I getting paid the same amount for providing data I can pick up at Target versus, to your point, something that's maybe a little bit more specialized? And I just want to make sure I understand the workflow. So somebody's coming to Sapien demanding some type of specific data that's labeled, and then am I, as somebody who's labeling it, finding that contractor, like that specific demand that they're looking for and fulfilling it? Or am I generally labeling whatever I want and getting paid based on how you guys fit to that contractor, to your clients effectively?
Yeah. Think of it kind of like, think of it,
Yep.
Think of it like Uber. So you have Uber X, and that's like lower tier, anyone can do it. And then there's Uber Black, and you need to be a specialized driver. You need to be licensed. You need to wear a suit, whatever. You need to have a nice car. So it's the same kind of thing for data labeling. Like, if you want to just do the base level stuff, you don't need any skills or registration. But if you want to label medical data, then we have to onboard you and verify you as an actual radiologist. We're not quite at the point yet where we have enough liquidity in the network where anyone can just log in and label data forever. But we're working towards that. It's like any two-sided marketplace, right? You have to do things gradually. You need to subsidize one side of the marketplace. And in this case, it's the demand side. We've focused on subsidizing our enterprise customers because we think the demand will bring the supply. If you have money that anyone can do by playing a game, we think that's the easy part. The hard part is getting the money first. But yeah, to answer your question right now, it's more manually. So each enterprise customer, we have to do custom integrations with them for whatever data formats they use and modalities.
And we have to go source. We have a customer that's building a math GPT model in Asia, and we have to find Mandarin-speaking mathematicians to label that data. And I didn't want to do it, but then they gave us the quote of $2 per label. We usually pay 2 cents per label. So that's where the market's moving. It's more of a bitch to integrate. It's a lot of manual stuff, but the margins are just much better. So, and that's where the puck is moving. These new models by Google and stuff, or the next ones are all, they've got enough low-level labelers. They all want specialized networks. You use these models to replace your doctor, your lawyer, everything else. That's kind of where the market's going. Maybe you want to encourage one?
Sure. I think we've got just a question for Taco.
This sort of goes on to the question that you were asked, but anyone can use you. Anyone can use you without having the KYC, just signing on with a wallet, correct?
Yeah, we actually.
I gotta turn this one off. There you go.
Yeah, we actually. If you look at, for any of the founders in the room, because we struggle with this at Polymath a little bit. My last company, it's like you have equity and you have tokens, and which one? Who's your boss, right? Is it token holders or equity holders? And so the new modern way to build companies, and we ended up solving that by just building an L1, putting everything into the token. But this time around, there's kind of a way to do it. Andreessen popularized this. Andreessen Horowitz, this is how they like their portfolio companies to build Web3 companies. You get product market fit first, whatever you're doing, in Web2. And then you build a community. That's step 2. And then that's kind of getting product market fit, part 2. And then only then you can think about retroactively dropping the token to your users, like launching the token is the 3rd step. Not like the first step like it used to be in 2018. It's the last step. And why would you launch a token? Well, it depends. Are you an L1? You're going to have a whole different tokenomics than you are if you're an application on someone else's blockchain. And so, for example, for us, we haven't like formally announced anything yet, but we're exploring ways to use a token to acquire labelers, like using a points program to acquire labelers is always an interesting way to use your token. Engagement and retention, that's another good reason for an application token to exist, is to retain and engage users. And then the third thing is whatever your product needs. In our case, it's quality. So it's like using native Web3 things to actually make your project better. There's still no canon here yet. It's all still being developed, but there's more modern ways to launch Web3 tokens in a more compliant way than ever.
Last question. Yep.
Hopefully this works. Yeah, first of all, thank you for creating and giving this insightful information. Question for you, when or how would we invest if we were interested in Sapien?
Yeah, no,
I'm just curious. I'm not following yet, but I'm following.
yeah, no, thank you.
Like follow.
The thing for now is there's nothing to invest in really until we have that Web3 product market fit. So the main thing we're looking for now is just kind of like community members. We're always looking to expand. It started out, the labeler started out with just one group narrowly that we knew and we trusted. But our goal is to make it so anyone can be a labeler, regardless of your skills or whatever. So that's the best way to interact now, is to like actually become a labeler, use the product, and then as like time goes on, there may be more opportunities to invest later on.
Cool.
Well, thanks, David.
All right. Thank you, Trevor. That was awesome. I think we got to turn that one off. Thank you. All right. Cool. Well, want to shift over to a different subject. So we've covered a lot of great ground today when it comes to agents, when it comes to the compute side. We've talked about some of the use cases and the applications, but we haven't dived into capital yet. And so we've got Mike here from one of our Toronto-based venture capital firms. And so, yeah, we're just going to kind of have a fireside chat, and then we'll open up for a broader conversation. But joining me on stage, why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself first.
Thank you very much. And maybe we can bring that after.
Yeah.
But
Hey everybody, my name is Mike Rentis. I'm one of the managing partners at Contango Digital Assets, here with my partner Josh. We are first and foremost a venture capital firm in the Web3 space. We have a couple different business lines under the umbrella, so I'll just name 3 of them. One of them is a fund specifically devoted to investing at the intersection of blockchain and AI. So that's a $10 million fund. We are in the final process of raising right now, but already have a few portfolio companies like Sapien. So thanks Trevor and Ben and Wombo. We also have a private community of about 250 angel investors in which we syndicate capital on a deal-by-deal basis, and we invest broad spectrum Web3, so anything from GameFi, DeFi, infrastructure, or AI. And then finally, because we are so focused on AI, we have an incubator focused on the BitTensor ecosystem called General Tao Ventures, in which we take some of our portfolio companies and help shepherd them into the BitTensor ecosystem to build subnets or validators or miners. So excited to be here, thanks.
Awesome. We could probably grab another mic, Jeff, if you want to bring one more mic up. And let's get Ben up here. Feel free to join us. You can grab that mic out of this. Grab that mic out of the seat. Yep. Ben, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello.
Yep, go ahead. I turned this one off.
How's it going, guys? What's up? I'm Ben. Founder of
That's for
Wombo.
the recording, not for the audio. Go ahead, Ben.
What should I say?
Whatever you want. Yeah, I was talking about Wombo.
Decentralized AI is cool. Fuck Sam Altman, was that the one? Yeah, I don't know. We used to be a Web 2 company. I bought some weed with Bitcoin back in 2012. And so it kind of germinated in my mind for the last decade, but I missed every cycle. And now we're back at the Web 3. So we have really, really popular apps. We wrap AI models up into something that's fun and easy to use for noise. And now we are working on something in distributed compute called deAI.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, I want to get into sort of your motivations. I think you got to turn that one off. So I think I'd love to get into your motivations because as far as I'm aware, you're one of the first VCs to have a pure thesis on decentralized AI, right? I mean, the whole industry's only been around a few months. I remember last September, people were like just even starting to use the term, right? And so just curious, what inspired you guys to move so quickly on this? It sounds like you're already doing an incubator and funding all these different projects, and I think there are a lot of builders in the room. It might be useful to talk about what you look for, what you guys want to support, what do you see next developed in the tech stack?
Sure. So, I think from day one, when we founded Contango, the idea was to accelerate the adoption of decentralized systems. I think everybody in here would probably agree that decentralization is probably one of the paths for a prosperous humanity and probably one of the best paths to take in order to kind of exaggerate global peace. And so, that was one of our core theses. And then when we saw the way that AI was developing in the centralized manner that AI was developing, we thought probably nothing more important to decentralize than AI. Now, obviously, that's the philosophical version. The dollars and cents version is one. Okay, well, maybe first I'll talk about why they need each other, because I think blockchain and AI are two parallel industries that are now converging at a rate faster than probably anybody thought would happen. And, blockchain needs intelligence, and AI needs trust of information, and it needs incentive. So AI is never going to get a Swift bank account. It's never going to transact money on the fiat system. It needs a native digital currency in order to transact value, share reputation, and share information from agent to agent. And I think AIs will transact at a velocity so much faster than what we've ever seen humans transact at. It'll be a massive catalyst for not just GDP, but for global growth. So the technologies merge so well, and they're very important to each other. But I think blockchain specifically solves a lot of problems that AI has. And then if we want to talk about dollars and cents, most people are familiar with Moore's law, which is, the compute power in a single chip doubles every 2 years. Most people are not familiar with the amount of exponentials that are going into AI right now.
Yep.
So an exponential in the amount of dollar value that's being dedicated to compute clusters. Decentralization or open source is an exponential of itself because anybody can go build on other people's work. There's the exponential of compute power in Moore's law. There's the exponential of training data that's being produced on a daily basis by teams like Sapien. Yep. There's an exponential in the amount of data that's collected on a daily basis by the entire human civilization on the internet. So it's sitting on the shoulders of like 5 or 6 exponential curves that are all collapsing at the same time on each other, and there's massive value to be had in this ecosystem. So there's like an economical reason for why we did this, but there's also a philosophical reason. I think they just tie well together.
Well, I think it's worth emphasizing the point, and this is one of my favorite quotes from Eric Voorhees. Did you guys see when he said on a big interview, agents and smart agents, are fundamentally different because AI today is about information, but these centralized AIs can't take economic actions because they don't have bank accounts and they're not gonna get a bank accounts. Crypto is the way that agents are going to take economic actions, right? This whole concept we talk about today of smart agents, connecting them to smart contracts, using Web3 wallets to do that, roots it in the human, right? A human authorizing a transaction. And so I think you're right, we're going to see this Cambrian explosion of agents getting released because now there's an incentive, there's a network to provide the compute, the models that are open source have reached parity now with the closed models, which people thought was impossible. Like last year, they're like, oh, that'll never happen. They'll always be way behind. And here we are, right? And just practically, when you talk to builders, what do you want to see in projects that you're supporting? Anybody can go to your website and see the portfolio, but what are you looking for? What do you want to see?
I think, well, to Trevor's point earlier, I think there's a new state of the art in terms of how tokens are distributed and how companies need to be built in the Web3 space. So, where in 2017, 2018, people would launch a token and then build a project with the money that they raised. It has to be the opposite way around now. That's just kind of table stakes. I think specifically if we talk about the AI sector, we look for AI developers first that have moved into blockchain versus blockchain developers that have moved into AI. Typically, because there's AI is such a deep technical space, and unfortunately there are a lot of opportunists in our space that will put a wrapper on a GPT clone and call it a $100 million valuation company. So talking to the companies that are, or the founders that are extremely technical first, have a background, have maybe launched a project in the past that has been successful, that is a real indicator of success for an early company anyways. Having true community is another big thing. So having built, a massive community on Discord or a massive community on Telegram, that's not just a number on your subscriber list, but that's actually active, engaged, helping, building parts of the protocol. Morpheus is a perfect example. Community run, community built, but everybody, so many contributors. Can't remember the number of contributors he told me yesterday, but it's a lot. And so having a thriving ecosystem is like table stakes as well in the Web3 space. And also trying to innovate and create new ideas. I think we saw a number of cycles in DeFi where there were just another lender or another borrower, another AMM, and everybody trying to build their own product that is a clone of products that already exist. So finding a new way to innovate, finding a new space that has a blue ocean that is not yet tapped, and going in and just being bold. You don't have to have all the answers right away, but you have to have the idea and the leadership to bring a community behind you to go build that. Because you don't know, the nice thing about Web3 is you don't have to build the whole thing yourself. If you have a thriving community, they can help you build it as well.
Well, maybe just to build on that for Ben, is that same thing you're seeing emerge here in Toronto? It seems like a lot of the projects we're talking to are all based out of here. Like, you know, literally there was a couple of posts and an email, and you know, hundreds of people showed up today. And oh, by the way, the founders are already all in Toronto. Like, I didn't even know they were based in Toronto. Just curious, you know, you're building here. Why are you choosing to build here? And what do you think we can continue to keep building up the community?
I'm building here mainly because of immersion. So I was here before, and so I remain here now.
There you go. Very honest.
You know, I think Toronto is a great place to build a company, and you have everything you need here. Amazing talent, I mean, capital you can get from anywhere in the world, really. And people are willing to work on exciting, ambitious things. My perspective as, you know, the founder of the company is I should be in the place that will make my company the most successful. And I have no patriotic or nationalistic attachments, unfortunately including to Toronto.
I love the cut of your jib. It's pretty awesome, I just have to say. Cool. Well, I want to open it up for questions because the whole thing about the summit is we've got great people in the audience, want to tap their intelligence. And, you know, so I think Jeff has grabbed the mic, and why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
So a trend I've been seeing that's challenging, certainly over the last 3 years, is kind of like the Web 2 funding dichotomy versus the Web 3 dichotomy. So let's just say we're all sitting here in Web 2.5 for simple analogy. Web 3 guys seem fixated on tokens. Web 2, you know, how much MRR do you have? And the kind of classic venture scale versus token scale. A lot of companies seem to be trapped in the middle here of trying to build a legitimate Web3 cash flow generating business, but not going to go commit securities issues by issuing tokens too early or at all. What's that look like here in 2024 going into 25 in terms of, let's call it Web 2.5 and the funding stack that's going to evolve here?
So I think the short answer is a lot of companies have just, you know, gone to raising with the stake plus token warrant, which is the easiest way to do it. You know, you're not issuing the token right away, but you're giving those early investors the right to those pro rata tokens once they launch. I think more and more people are getting accustomed to value accrual coming into the token rather than the equity. And I think over time, even Web 2 investors are starting to realize that value accrual to a token is actually a great thing. You get early liquidity, you get faster time to liquidity than you would with an equity exit. You get more optionality of potentially staking those tokens and earning a yield on them. You get to actually participate in the decision making of the protocol. There's usually more voting rights than you would have on even a pref stack equity share, because you're not, you know, having board meetings every month or every, you know, twice a week. And so there's a lot of value that is now starting to be realized on the token side. And I think it's part and parcel to just an evolution of how this game is going. If you're a Web3 company, or if you're a Web2 investor investing in Web3 companies, you have to be okay with value accrual going to the token. And most of the time you're getting both sides of the ticket anyway, so you're getting the equity side and you're getting the token, so it's a bit of a double dip.
Well, and if I can put in the word for fair launches, right? This is a big evolution we've seen in the last year, is effectively a new take on how to even do a token, which is there is no pre-mine. and it's built by a community, and there is no promoter, and the only people that have it are the people that earned it, right? And now that we finally have the tools to do that all in the smart contracts, you can do it without a custodian, right? Like, people come and pitch me, they're like, oh, I want a grant from the Morpheus Treasury. I was like, there is no Morpheus Treasury. Morpheus doesn't hold anybody's money. Everybody still holds their own money, and the only thing the yield is used for is to add to protocol liquidity, right? To burn tokens, to add to the Uniswap pool. That's it. There's no centralized decider, right? And so effectively that gives people the freedom to make an individual choice about staking, about providing that yield, about getting their capital back, right? And so, I'd be curious your take on fair launches, because I think, to your point, that's a huge benefit to capital provider. Even if it's a 90-day bootstrapping period, you're effectively immediately getting liquidity on something you created. And for a founder, it moves away from needing a company or a lot of the traditional infrastructure.
Or any securities risk, right? Like, I think fair launches, and Morpheus being one of the pioneers of the fair launch, at least of the new wave of fair launches, given Bitcoin, obviously.
Yep.
But I do think, fair launches are probably the way of the future, and probably where a lot of projects are going to look to bootstrap. Now that we have, the opportunity to essentially just delegate your yield from Ethereum to any project that you want to support, you're still holding on to your own tokens. You're not paying that initial fee, but you're bootstrapping companies that could potentially do great things for the world by just giving them your interest, right? And so I think fair launches make a lot of sense, not just from a regulatory perspective, also from just like a capital allocation perspective, lowers your risk as an investor, and creates a lot more trust and transparency in the projects. So, I know I'm sitting on the VC side, but I'll tell you, one of the trends in the Web3 space that I don't like is a lot of the value is being captured in private markets. Whereas very early in Web3, companies would launch very early, and the average everyday person had the opportunity to make 100x or 1,000x if they bought a really good company really early. Whereas now, companies are doing a pre-seed, a seed, a private B, a strategic round, and then a launch. And by the time those companies launch, they're at $200 or $300 million or $1 billion. And the average everyday retail investor is just going to get dumped on by their VCs. So fair launch tokens bring a lot more trust to your community, because there's no VCs that just bought an early bag that can dump on you when the price goes high. So I think that's a really good way of aligning incentives, not just with your early capital providers, but with your entire community and building trust.
Awesome. Well, do we have any other questions? Looks like we got a couple here in the front. Michael, come around.
Extending that, what do you see as the interface between fair launch and VCs, and what would the role of the VC be in a world where everything is fair launch?
It's a good question, and the role has to evolve. So I'll talk a little bit about General Tao Ventures, which is our subsidiary focused on BitTensor. BitTensor was a fair launch token, and they have subnets on the network that do different types of compute tasks, right? Anybody can set up a subnet. Wombo has set up a subnet, and each of those subnets will create a different compute resource, let's call it. Those subnets actually cost money. You have to stake a bunch of Tau to register the subnet. And then once your subnet is registered, if it gains trust and reputation from the community, it will earn emissions, right? So what we can do as VCs is we can provide a portion of the stake fee, or the stake the amount of capital that needs to be staked, in return for a percentage of the ongoing emissions that come from that subnet. So if the community likes what the subnet is producing, be that digital intelligence or bandwidth or vision or text generation or prompting, whatever it might be, then that subnet will earn more emissions, and we will, as a percentage shareholder in those emissions, earn more in perpetuity.
The expected return there would be lower than 1,000x of launching an IP or
Potentially, or maybe I would argue the opposite. Whereas you might not ever get, like, where you might get an exit liquidity of 5% of your tokens at 1000x. If all those VCs are just dumping on their communities, probably the remainder of your tokens are going to go closer to like 1x, 2x, because the whole price of the token dumps. Whereas these fair launch projects, because they build trust so early, they have the potential to kind of be an upward slope hockey stick as opposed to just down only. So I think it builds it builds more lasting trust with community.
Yep. Well, I would use the classic example of Ethereum. There was plenty of VCs that participated in the crowd sale, but so could everybody else. Mm-hmm. And so you had 17,000 participants in the crowd sale for Ethereum. The average person put in 1 Bitcoin, which at the time was like $900. But some VCs put in $250,000, $500,000, whatever, and they're getting the same token exposure as everybody else, right? And to his point, it's a smart strategy. You're effectively earning emissions by partnering with a project that has the technical ability, and you're just offering the capital so they can do the stake they need in the system to be successful. So it's a smart strategy, but his upside is still the same as it was before. It's another way to accrue the tokens, right? And so VCs, I think, are still providing the intelligence and the signal, oh, we're going to support this project because we did a bunch of due diligence. Like, what do VCs really do? They do research. They figure out which projects they think have the best team or the best tech, and they signal towards that with their capital. Now they're just doing it in public for everybody to see in an open source context. We want to support this group. We're putting our money where our mouth is. So I don't think VCs are going away. People have also asked me that for like the last 10 years. Oh, so like VCs are going away. I said, no, because you still need the intelligence of the GP to provide that insight. So great question though. I think we had one last one over here, and we'll keep going. Anything you want to add?
The one other thing I would add is just the network and connections of VCs can be very helpful for their portfolio companies as well, because we're seeing companies specifically at the intersection of blockchain and AI day in, day out. There's oftentimes many potential partners that we can put companies in touch with. That's more value than just capital, but everybody says that, so that's fine.
Cool.
Hi, yeah. So in the beginning, you were talking about the integration of blockchain and AI and how crucial that sort of synergy is. In terms of being specific, when you look at things like the securitization of RWAs or just generally things in the capital markets, where would you, as an experienced VC, say you see the biggest connection that AI and blockchain can have?
Well, I think smart agents are going to be incredibly useful, and probably the amount of GDP produced by smart agents is only going to increase as a percentage versus GDP produced by humans over time.
Yep.
Actually, I'll take a page out of Trevor's book from a conversation we had a while back, but he made a really good comment that application layers are, well, first you need to build a protocol layer, right? And then people build applications on top of protocols until it gets to a point where something breaks on the protocol level. And then you need to go back and you need to reinvest in scaling solutions and DA layers and faster infrastructure on the base layer until that's done, and then people build new, better apps on top of that new infrastructure, and the cycle just keeps repeating itself. And I actually really like that analogy because it shows that value will accrue everywhere in the stack. There might just be different times or different cycles in which value accrues to applications versus when value accrues to infrastructure versus when it might go to the models or the inference or the training companies behind each. So less about where the value is going to accrue and more about the opportunities in the market and what is needed at any given time, I think. I think DeFi offers a really good opportunity, or AI offers a really good opportunity to break open DeFi for the average retail user, demystify it, simplify it for the average everyday user. If they can use natural language to say, hey, I want to trade X tokens for or Y, or I want to stake my yield here until Bitcoin gets to a certain price, they can start to do that in natural language. And so I think AI will be a catalyst not just for a specific sector of blockchain, but probably the entire stack, because it's going to just slowly seep its way into really everything that we do.
Cool. Ben, you got any closing thoughts for us?
No, I think you guys put it well. I guess the way I've been conceptualizing this is I imagine that this AGI hive mind is here already. And I try to think about, what does it want? It wants data. It wants compute. It wants human expertise. It wants to interact with itself and build more complex systems. What do humans want? Humans want money, entertainment, sex, gambling, friendship. Good stuff too. No friendship? Okay. And maybe there's a third group, which is what does all of humanity want? And I think all of humanity wants to survive, to not get, fucked by robots, to have like a peaceful coexistence with like a, AGI that's friendly to us. And if we, in my opinion, if we want to get realistic, I think if we let this technology continue to evolve, at some point it replaces humanity entirely. And maybe there are scenarios in which that's acceptable, in which the sort of AI that we give birth to, we consider a worthy successor. So, yeah.
Just give my take on that. I really like your comments. Like that's a good frame. Like what do machines want? And I always thought the Terminator situation was pretty hilarious because what do they want? They want to compute and power all these things. And here we are shoving in GPUs as fast as we possibly can. Like we're if the AGI was conscious, like we're literally doing the things it wants, right? So I wrote a paper back in 2016. Where I made the argument that blockchain is how we survive the coming of strong AI. And using encryption, using private public key cryptography, we have the opportunity to put the human at the heart of those AIs, to have a personal AI that reflects your values, your preferences, your desires, what outcomes you want. And I think that leads to a merger. That's my view, and you could call that a successor, but clearly we're headed in that direction. If you don't adopt technology, you're disrupted from the outside, right? And if you don't support life, you fail from the inside. So we need to be both supporting technology and life, right? I often describe myself as a techno-Amish, right? Like peace and life, it's all good, but I'm very optimistic about technology. I think you need both, right, over time. So awesome discussion. We'll let you guys, big round of applause for our speakers. That's awesome. So if you guys want to transition down, the last person we have